Ciao, jewelry makers. I'm Joey Balistreri, and my samples that you see on my mat today are some minimalist chic bar necklaces that I made many years ago. So this is an old type of necklace. It's been around forever, not new. And I have had these in my jewelry wardrobe for several years and they need an update. But I just thought I would share with you some of the variations that I have done on these. So this is a great beginner project because you will literally be making a wire wrapped loop on either end of a bar, and that is the most difficult part of it. And the rest is just cutting chain and opening and closing jump rings. And you can have a lot of fun with your bead patterns on these. So because this is a minimalist, chic style necklace, I would always keep my bars very petite and keep the scale very small, and even choose beads that all continued the line, so to speak, if that makes sense. Nothing that was larger or like alternating sizes that we do on other types of necklaces. That's the way I have always seen these. And so the ones that I've made for myself here are quite small, and I've used various chains. I found some brass chains on clearance at one of our local craft stores a few years ago that already had the lobster claw on the end, and that worked really well for these. And then I found just some fashion chains that I did these with that already had the extender chain and the lobster claw clasp, but I had to do a little coating on these because they do tarnish quite badly. But these were simple, a string of beads in a pattern that I like, beads that I like. You can add a metal presence in between or just a clean line of beads. Again, bearing in mind that it's a minimalist style of necklace. But I had also scaled this up a little bit on one of my designs. I did a stainless steel chain and used some Heishi beads and sort of did an offset or asymmetrical design on the bar on this one. So as you can see, this one is a tiny bit larger in scale than my other ones. So today we're going to do one together, and it's very simple, quick project. But at the end, as I said, I'm going to do another little updated version. And so just to show you what I look at for these projects, I look for beads that maybe have an unusual shape or that it's a gemstone. And I look for something like this. I picked these up in Gainesville at the bead shop there. And so I look for something that's unusual, like these lock together, sort of fit together like a puzzle piece. But for a length of them, that would make a really beautiful, unique bar on one of these minimalist necklaces. I also found this at one of our craft stores. And so these are just glass faceted rondelles, but they are done in an ombre color, starting from white and going into the pinks and burgundies and then that really dark Bordeaux red. And so I was thinking for a bar necklace to easily choose like a section of the ombre and that be the bar just by itself. So that is another option. And then also what works really well for these are micro-faceted gemstones. So these are from the Beadbox Bargains website, and these are extremely small. And they are garnets that are micro-faceted. They don't want to come out, but they sparkle like crazy. So even by themselves, just a length of these for a very minimalist bar necklace would be lovely. The only issue with something so tiny is that you have to use at least a 24, maybe even 26 gauge wire to go through the holes. And that makes your bar a little bit fragile sometimes. But if you don't mind a piece of fragile jewelry, it certainly is lovely. And then from time to time online, this was a closeout. These are 3mm pink tourmaline beads that are faceted. And I ordered these also thinking, what a beautiful little gemstone bar necklace that would be. As you can see, they have a lot of sparkle to them as well. So those are some of the things that I look for. And then if I do want a gold presence or silver presents, you know, a metal presence in my design, I will look for tiny little brass spacers. And these are ones that were left over from one of our monthly bargain bead box subscriptions, who even knows how long ago. But that can add a nice little metal presence and add a little something to your bar. So together, I want to make one with you today, and I have already selected my pieces for it. So I took this magnetic clasp from our bargain bead box. I had one left over, and that's what I am going to use on my necklace. That was a brass magnetic clasp, and I don't know at the time that you watch this if they will still have that on their website, but it's not a difficult supply to find. And then at one of our craft stores, I had found these little hematite, they're reconstituted gold hematite beads. They're very small, but they look so great. Let me see if I have one. I had used them a few years ago on this bar necklace, and they are just beautiful. And because they're in that sort of he-she shape, it makes a continuous look on the bar. And then I also had from one of our past monthly bead box bargains, you know, we get amazing gemstones in that subscription box. So I have these beautiful faceted, micro-faceted beads, garnet beads. And so I'm going to do my bar out of these and these reconstituted hematite. And I have a length of chain here that I love. I've used it on my hand chain that I'm wearing. And if you haven't seen this video, go in my playlist under bracelets and hand chains and watch this video. It's really fun. It's an easy project and it's unique and really fun. But this, as you can tell, is a chain that I really like. I get it from a company that I found at a bead show called puritybeads.com, and it has a coating for anti-tarnish, and I really love it. So I'm going to be using an 18-inch length of that, because that's another thing about the bar necklaces. I generally love really long necklaces, but these just look great at around the 18-inch length for me. So I also made my jump rings here, and I'm going to show you how I do that, but that is so that my jump rings match my chain and match my bar where I'm going to wire wrap. And also the Beadalon 20 gauge round German style wire that I use is anti-tarnish. And so if I do the jump rings out of the same wire, then I know that my necklace is going to be consistent and have a little bit of longevity. So let's start by taking a little, I'm going to leave it on the spool, and I'm going to take a bail making plier, because again, this is minimalist and it's going to be very small, a very simple thin line of beads. I want really small jump rings because I want them to transition seamlessly and not be too noticeable. So I have these 6-step bail making pliers, and I'm going to choose this mandrel on this and just make a few coils. So I'm just going to get a hold of it and just make a coil and keep going and just coil around as many rotations as I think that I need jump rings. So I'll just keep going. I usually do a little bit extra than what I need. So if I didn't cut it cleanly, or then I have an extra and I don't have to redo the process. So I'm just going to remove my tool and then take my cutters, and with the flush side, the back side of the cutter, I'm going to find that first rotation. Actually, let me take this off of the spool now. It will be easier to show you, much easier. So now I'm going to find that first coil, and I want the back of my cutters to go right where that last coil, or the first coil, was. And I'm just going to snip as straight of a line as I can, one jump ring at a time, and go all the way to the end of the coil that I made. And then I have my own jump rings made, and they are the same wire that I'm going to be using for the rest of my project, and so everything will match, and everything is anti-tarnish coating. And I'll put those in the dish, and those are ready to go. So now I just need to decide my pattern. So the first thing I'll do is take a length of this wire, and I like to start with a straight piece of wire always, but on one of these bar necklaces, it's really a good idea to start with as straight of a piece of wire as you can muster. And we will be making very tiny wire wrapped loops, so I'm going to give myself a little bit more than I might need. So if my bar is 1.5 inches, 2 inches, this is, you know, I have to remember to give you actual measurements because I measure with my heart. I'm going to take about a 5.5 inch piece of wire just because I don't want to run short. So let's cut that off the spool. Set that aside. I need this plier. And so I'm going to start by, before I do my pattern, I'm going to cut my chain in half because I can wire wrap my loops right onto the chain without a jump ring. So those jump rings that we made are going to be for the magnetic clasp at the back of the necklace. Let me just lay this out. If I know that you guys have probably seen this little trick if you've been around jewelry making at all. Instead of counting links or trying to measure with a ruler, you take a piece of wire and put it in your link, in one of the links of chains, and that helps you to see if you have found the middle. And I have. It is that link right there, and that's where I'm going to cut. Just take that off. So now I have 2 lengths of chain, and when I'm ready to do my first wire wrap, I can connect it right to that chain. Again, because it's minimalist, I don't want to have anything extra unless it's necessary, so no extra jump rings. I wanted to do the bar portion of my minimalist necklace in that 20 gauge wire that we did the jump rings out of, but it does not fit through these micro faceted garnet beads. So I had to go down to the same wire, bead-along German style in the gold color. So it does match my chain and my jump rings, but the 24 gauge. I don't have 22 gauge on hand. I wish that I did because that would be a little bit thicker, but I have done my hand chains with this wire and they have held up really well, and I wear them and work with them on. So I'm going to do this bar necklace for you out of this 24 gauge wire. So I have a nice straight piece. It's really important with these bar necklaces because it is a straight bar to start off with a nice straight piece of wire. And I have put a 90-degree, I just grabbed a hold of it and put a 90-degree bend. And then I want this loop to be quite small. So I'm going to stay down near the very tip of my pliers where the mandrel is the smallest, and just bring that wire over and rotate it and come around. And I like to, especially on a bar necklace like this, I want everything centered and as neat as I can get it. So I have this perfect tiny little loop, and I'm going to open it and connect it to one length of my chain before I close it up and do those wraps. So now I'm going to lock this into place, and now I want to do my wraps as neatly as I can and keep this wire nice and straight. And I'm going to want to repeat the same number of wraps and try to have the other end of my bar looking exactly the same. I think that I'm going to do 3 wraps. This wire is so fine. So you can remove your plier and have a look. Mine are nice and neat. I'm happy with them. Then I can trim away that little tail. And after the beads are on, I'll check and make sure that everything is tucked when I have a little bit to hold on to. So that's the first step of our bar. And now I just want to play with my beads and my tiny hematite spacers and get a pattern that I'm happy with. So I like to work in odd numbers. So I'm going to start out with 5, just because these are so very tiny. So I'm going to start out with 5 and then put on one of these hematite spacers, and then let me see what 7 of these garnets look like. So I'm going to play around a little bit with my pattern. So I'll pause the video at this point, and when I've settled on the pattern, we'll come back and finish this together. So I like my bar to be around 1.5 inches. Once the loops are wrapped, it will be a little bit longer than that, but 1.5 to 2 inches, or 1.75 inches seems to be the sweet spot for me for this bar. So I'm happy with my odd numbers. I did 5 of the microfaceted garnets, a little hematite bead, and then 7 garnets for the center part, another hematite, and then 5 on the other end. So now I am simply going to repeat on this side exactly what I did on the other side, and I want to make sure that my loops are going the same way. So I have put my pliers on the wrong side. So I'm going to grab that wire right where it's exiting my last garnet and give it a 90-degree bend. And then come in with my round nose pliers right on that very tip, because I want the same size loop on this end as I have on the other end, and make that perfect loop and make sure that it is centered. I want that loop to be centered on that wire. And now I'm just going to open this very small loop and take my second piece of chain and string that on. And now I can tighten that down where I gave myself the space to string the chain on and start my wrap. So I'm going to start by just locking it into place, and I have a little bit of extra wire on this end that I didn't have on the other end, so I don't even need to do my pliers. I can do this side with my fingers. And I want to try to get the same number of wraps on this end as I did on the other end, but I want to maintain how straight this is, and I want it to be really a solid bar. So I like to make it a little as tight as I can. I am really happy with that. It is beautiful. I mean, those gorgeous garnets that are microfaceted definitely add to the beauty of the design. There's a little bit too much tail there. Try to trim it a little bit closer. That's better. And now that I have a little bit to hold on to, I can go in very carefully and just making sure not to put any stress on those beautiful gemstones. Just tuck those tails, make sure that it is a nice, tight, neat, perfect coil. That is gorgeous. And you know, if you get your wraps nice and tight, it makes this, I can't bend this with my finger, even though it's on that very thin wire. I got a beautiful, perfect bar. That is just gorgeous. So now that is how simple these are. This is not only minimalist in design, but also in labor. So now I can take 2 of the little jump rings that we created and simply attach my clasp. And even the clasp on this is super simple, because there isn't a right or a left hand side the way you might do on a lobster claw clasp or toggle clasp. If you're right-handed, it may matter to you how you connect, but on this, it is so simple because both sides of this magnet are exactly the same. So I just want to add that jump ring and make sure it's closed really well. I can still see a little bit of space, so let me wiggle it tighter. And since these jump rings are so small, I'm going to put my plier in the loop like that and just give it a tiny bit of pressure so that it is a solid circle. And we'll do the same exact thing on the other side. Super simple, super beautiful project. And I wear these so much. I find myself reaching for my minimalist pieces a lot. If you guys have listened to me in other videos, you know that I make a lot of jewelry, but I don't wear that much jewelry. And I find that even when I'm enthused about a design, I might only wear it once or twice and then I'm over it. But on these minimalist pieces, they stay in my jewelry wardrobe for a really long time. They have a lot of longevity for me, and they just seem to go with whether I'm wearing yoga clothes or a t-shirt and jeans. They just seem to stay in my wardrobe for a long time. I'm going to do the same thing with my plier. Just go inside and just give it a little squeeze. So this stunning minimalist chic bar necklace is done. I am going to do a second bar, a little different version of it. Let me clear this away. And I have already started this one. This one has a little bit larger beads. So let me pick up my garnets so that I keep them together. And so on this one, I have taken a piece of 18 gauge wire. Let me show you the spool. It's right here. This is the Softflex craft wire, and this is non-tarnish copper, and this is 18 gauge. Now, the reason that I chose this is that I'm going to do a bar necklace, but one that goes vertically instead of horizontally. And so I did this ahead of time because I wanted to hammer my spiral flat, but you could do anything that you wanted here. You could do one tiny little loop so that you almost don't see it, so that it looks like just a bar, but I really like the spirals. That is my style. So I have created that, and this anti-tarnish copper wire is great if you don't damage your wire with your pliers, if you don't nick it, because then you remove the coating and then it would start to tarnish. But I really love this wire. So this is just the same principle that I did for this horizontal bar necklace, where I am looking for things that will give me a nice linear design and add a tiny bit of metal presence. And on this one, I am working with copper and purple. So these gemstone beads were bag 21 in a past monthly subscription of Bargain Bead Box, and this was a gorgeous lavender quartz faceted rondelle beads, and these are 4 by 3 millimeter. So if you're out shopping for gemstones for a bar necklace, that will give you an idea. And what I usually do with this is start to create my pattern. I just did this on a scrap of wire just to play with my pattern. So I had in this one, I had these antique copper plated spacer beads. These are 4 millimeter spacer beads, and I think these also came from Bead Box Bargains. I have this is when I check in an order of beads. This is the way that I normally do it so that I have the information. But a 4 millimeter copper spacer bead. This is brass. They're brass beads, but they're antique copper plated. And I am not sure if that's from Bead Box Bargains or not, but you know what it is. And then these actually are from Bead Box Bargains. It was another 4 millimeter copper spacer bead. So I'm just showing you that so you know it's not that difficult to find. And then I also had these copper finish swirl beads, which were from Bead Box Bargains. And they are really small. I am not sure the millimeters on this, but again, my goal when I make one of these bar necklaces is to keep everything in line. It's a linear design, and that also keeps the minimalist look when you don't have a lot of varying sizes in your beads and spacers. So these were also 4 by 2 millimeter little copper spacers. I don't know if they're still on their website because I have these in every finish of metal and I've had them for quite some time. But that is what I am working with in this project. So if you could see, let me set this aside out of the way. So if you can see what I have done here, I did not want to do a perfect counted out pattern. So I did one of the 4mm ball spacers at the bottom. I was just playing around with 1, 3, 5, 2, just, just an almost random pattern, but I sort of like the way the metal has landed on this line of lavender beads. So that is how I am going to string this pattern onto my bar. So I'm just going to take this out and get these on this bar. Now on this particular quartz bead, this 18 gauge wire, as you can see, it did go through very easily. And so did my spacers. On the garnet, I had to adjust my thickness of wire in order to make that bar. So depending on the beads you're working with, that's just what you'll have to work out. But generally on the gemstone beads that are microfaceted, they do not have really large holes. And, so on this one, I was fortunate that this quartz bead does have a large enough hole to go on this 18 gauge wire. In particular, I like that because this is a vertical bar and it won't have the stability. It's going to be dangling. It won't have the stability of being attached to the chain, and this is going to hang in the front. So there is my bar design. And now, just to show you, if you have seen any of my shorts or any of my videos on cutting down on the jewelry in your jewelry wardrobe, because jewelry makers end up with a lot of necklaces, bracelets, and things. So I have created a few simple basic chains that are empty. I have a copper one, a brass one, a gold one, silver, and I have a simple lobster claw clasp on it. And so as I'm making pendants and as I go through the seasons and as I get gemstone beads and want to make something for myself, instead of making an entire necklace, I will do beautiful pendants. And then when I'm ready to wear them, I just add it to the chain. So I just need to make sure that my bail or my loop on this end will go over one end of my clasp on my chain from my jewelry wardrobe. So on this, you can do a wire wrapped loop. You can also do a simple loop on this. I really like the wire wrapped loops, and I think that's what I'm going to do, is a very large wire wrapped loop. So I'm going to grab this where it is exiting that quartz bead and give it a bend. And then I want to come in and I'm going to go down on my plier again, so that my bail, I don't want to be too, if I'm up here, I'm going to have a much smaller loop. I want to go down